Imperialism and idealism can be seen as the main protagonists of the American foreign policy from 1977 until the present day, while isolationism was of no resilience at that time, which is to be investigated with the same respect as the two previous ideologies. A History of American Foreign Relations from 1897 by Howard Johns focused on American diplomacy during the Cold War, when it was impossible to characterize the period as it was a blend of containment, imperialism, and idealism, where the narrative was produced by domestic and foreign socioeconomic factors that have notably impacted the fashion of foreign affairs against the growing presence of enemies. Since the United States acquired more experience, wealth, and influence over time, surely political outcomes varied. That is why the main idea of the book is to draw the correlation between the resources and the behavior resulting in imperialistic or idealistic policies. Part 2 of the series will provide a closer examination of development of American foreign affairs from 1977 until the present day, and demonstrate why isolationism has grown out of fashion, how imperialism and idealism have been replacing each other as eccentric ideologies, and how the global role of the US has shifted on the arena.
Constant changes in external policy of the United States can be seen in the politics of American President Johnson and his interventionism policy during the Vietnam War, which is centric to understanding the motivation for American interventionism in the 60s. The context for the imperialistic move is that Johnson's administration was repeatedly condemned by many representatives of the authorities of other countries, by American people and by the UN. The purpose of American invention was to contain the spread of communism and to support the minority of South Vietnam, which was struggling for democracy. Jones 2008 states that Johnson feared that if the USA wouldn't stop the spread now in South Vietnam, it would be in Hawaii tomorrow and then in San Francisco, thereby preserving the Great Society. But that was the official slogans of President Johnson and his followers. In the fact, the desire not to lose the war and to defend the honor of America were the main reasons, as well as President Johnson's personal desire to find the reasons to direct aggression. For example, the Tonkin incident led America to directly participate in the war. But after many condemnations from the authorities and other countries, Johnson changed his policy in the way of hiding it from others and act not openly. At the end, Johnson changed his policy to not aggressive, and then it happened because of many negotiations with North Vietnam, which also made some concessions. Thus, we can infer that the administration Americanized the war with the help of bombings, and which provided opportunity to improve the situation. But by 1968, serious fears had reached the White House, where the lack of progress in the Vietnam War and its huge costs soon forced changed the tactics in Vietnam War. Therefore, the US has proven itself to be manipulative of idealism and interventionism as the two main levers of pressure of the world.
Eventually, such hard power politics that was noticed in the 60s was substituted with individualistic principles of idealism presented by Jimmy Carter 1977-1981. They varied between either both mixture of idealism and realism that largely bordered with interventionism, or each of them implemented individually. Carter's idealism was based on the idea that the nation's foreign policy should reflect its highest moral principles, meaning that his administration will concentrate on tying the world together through economic and social means, including the establishment of a law of the seas, promoting the guarantee of human rights. That could be exemplified by his decision to end more than 30 years of US military and political support to one of the Latin America's most abusive leaders, President Somoza of Nicaragua. Yet, almost from the very beginning of his post, Carter faced challenges regarding his worldview because, first of all, morality rarely fits with the government's economic and strategic interests, often exposing the administration to the charges of hypocrisy. Secondly, support of human rights did not correlate with the goals of Soviet containment. For instance, the Carter's doctrine in many ways embodied realism by determining an area of American national interest and promising to effectively balance against the Soviet aggression if the Soviets demonstrated any intention to expand into the region. Moreover, the Carter's approach towards the Afghan crisis collapsed into bleak defeat. Meanwhile, several signs in the US pointed to the shift to Republican victory in 1980's presidential race. Jones 2008 stated that many Americans attributed the country's decline in prestige to the Carter's administration. 4 years of international embarrassment that was now capitalized by hostage crisis, he lamented, underlined the world's lack of respect towards the United States. In this case, the junction of two models of global governments collide as the US was promoting the culture of liberty. However, the means for which it was propagated were not always obvious to the US interest. Also, the means of accommodation of democratic values were not always peaceful, therefore could be confused with expansionist ones.
If we compare the last chapter of the book with the first, there is a key difference in the nature of political decision making. 100 years ago, before the intervention in Cuba, there were two conflicting points of view. The United States should not step back from the Monroe Doctrine, should not interfere in affairs on other continents. And the United States must participate in the world politics, otherwise other countries will use the resources not seized. Before the invasion of Iraq, there was another main question. Although the term imperialism was present in political rhetoric, is there evidence that the invasion is justified? The stated reasons for the invasion, weapon of mass destruction and support for Al-Qaeda by Saddam Hussein's regime had two roots. The first, after the Gulf War, when the regime kicked out the International Vendee Liquidation Commission. The second, after 11/9, as part of the war on terror. Despite the successful military operation to destroy the regime, two key shortcomings eliminated public support. There was no viable plan for the occupation and counteraction to the partisans, as well as absence of firm witnesses for Iraq's accusations. Subsequently, it caused anti-war sentiment in the United States. Nowadays, intervention as a tool in response to terrorism is dictated by democratic ideas, not imperialistic goals, as it was 100 years ago. The debate between isolationism and imperialism is outdated.
There are two main reasons for US not following the isolationist path since 1977. The first one would be that it was regarded as the global police for many emerging democratic regimes, and the second one would be the growing presence of enemies in the global arena, which was threatful to the national security and the different spheres of influence already established in the world. Speaking of the global police, it's very important to identify that many emerging democratic states were seeking for the American support and anti-Soviet resistance, as well as not necessarily democratic regimes were fond of American economic, military, or political aid when it came to the containment of the Soviet regime. Therefore, such a vital help that the US could provide could not be neglected by the governments that were rotating, changing, and either idealistic policies of establishing world order in a democratic fashion was required, or interventionism in order to prevent Soviet forces to enter into other spheres of influence. Which brings to the second point, which states that interventionist policies were more required than isolationist ones, as many different spheres of influence were globally established, and this web could have been easily challenged by other superpowers' influence that had a luxury of geographical proximity, or some unstable domestic regimes in other countries. Therefore, the US had to protect its own interests for its economic and political benefit globally, where the interventionist policies, for example, like it happened in Vietnam, could occur. And the way the proxy war in Korea, for instance, could serve as an example of idealistic policy, of idealistic motivation behind casualty, not free attack on Korean base.